retiring from a career as a global energy executive and the author of the book The Savage Path. No other than Mr. David Savage.
Thanks for having me on, Daniel. I appreciate you providing this opportunity for me to talk about the book and the topic of masculinity.
Yes, welcome, Mr. David, on Book One Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
So, I had an energy career for 31 years, and I traveled all over the world, which was very enjoyable to me. I have a passion for geopolitics, and I've learned a lot about other cultures. Was surprised, what you see about Middle Eastern culture, for example, when you're watching the news, is very different from actually, traveling in those countries and how warm and friendly those people really are. So I was very pleasantly surprised almost everywhere I went. I was a high level manager, so obviously I had my employees taking very good care of me. So maybe I got, just a real good view. But I retired at the end of 2018 and then went to work for 1 year. And then when the COVID pandemic hit, I was having to furlough people and lay them off. And I didn't really need that job. I was working for fun. So I decided to resign. And then I decided to write this book.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. David. Thank you. So today, let's talk about your book, The Savage Path. So, tell us, what was the key experience or realization made you embark on the Savage Path, and what did you hope to discover or reclaim?
Well, I believe that today masculinity has a bad rap. It's been under attack of feminism since the 70s, some of that deserved, but traditional Christian masculinity, and that is, marriage and raising a father and being the spiritual leader of the home, all that has kind of fallen away, and there aren't very many models out there. So what we have today, at least in the United States, is a manhood fog, and a manhood fog is not good for young men. That's what it results in is confusion. Um, Men who are confused, they settle for less in life, but they don't know it's less. They create problems. We have addictions, and pornography and gaming and alcohol and drugs, and then they guess at their masculinity and hope it works. So that's really what I was trying to address when I was writing the book.
Interesting, Mr. David. Why did you choose the word savage for the title? Is it a critic of outdated ideals or reclamation of a primal self or something else entirely?
It's my last name. So uh, if you look at the cover of the book, I've been an avid backpacker my entire life. Always enjoy being outdoors, and I have backpacked all over the place for 40 years. And so the metaphor for the book is the Savage Path, which is my path, David Savage. And the way that I portray it and lay it out in the book is, look, there's a trail, and there's a well-defined trail that you can see in the cover of the book. That's actually me on the cover in Glacier National Park. And when you hike the trail, it's a lot easier to hike than just, like this one represents the switchback instead of just going straight up or straight down the hill. And the way I view it is a man needs three things in this world. He needs a will to obey, and I think that's God's will, a work to do, and a woman to love. Now, in my life, as I was proceeding through, there were times when I wasn't really too obedient to God's will, and I was just out there doing things, and I was in my sinful lust
Mhm,
and greed and everything else that we all deal with, and that's when
mhm.
you're off the path. And when you're off the path, that's when you get lost and you're in the wilderness and you get scratched up and you're walking around deadfall and you don't really know where you are. And so that's the whole metaphor, is like, this is my path. And what I found is that when I stayed on the path and was in God's will, then things generally went very well. And when I was off the path, didn't go so well.
Mr. David, How did your background, family, or community first shape your understanding of what I meant to be man? And where did those lessons first begin to break down?
Well, my father was in the Air Force, and so we lived in Germany when I was a boy, and so I'm very patriotic. So God and country have always been very important to me, and that was when I got involved with the Boy Scouts of America. So a lot of my whole uh, growing up and impression of manhood was from strong military men. My scoutmaster was a chief master sergeant, and he was tough. I mean, every merit badge that I earned was extremely difficult. And he was also a real enforcer on things like courtesy. In fact, the scout law, as it's called, has 12 points, and it's like trustworthy, helpful, friendly. It's courteous. And so he had this bucket painted with a number 5 on it. And if I didn't say yes, sir, or no, sir, when he asked me a question, then I had to carry this bucket around at scout camp, and I had to take it to the dining hall, and I had to swim with it and everything. And he would give me a chance, to redeem myself. And I was thought I was being clever, and I would get around it a little bit. I'd say, okay. And he goes, well, you didn't say yes, sir. So now I'm going to put a big rock in it. and and then I had a can full of rocks, and I was like, okay, he broke my spirit as a rebellious 11-year-old at scout camp. And I said yes sir, yes sir, and I finally got rid of all the rocks and then the can, and I always said yes sir, no sir. And so that was something that actually proved to be very beneficial to me, because then as a young person speaking to adults, people say, you see a courteous child, you're impressed, and so
Mhm.
that worked well for me, and I learned a lot through scouting. And then my parents were good. I was very involved in church, and then just loving others, being a little bit more forgiving of others. I still struggle with that mightily. I'm not a merciful person by my nature. Maybe it's because of my last name, Savage. But anyway, so
Well,
that's a little bit about my background.
interesting, Mr. David. So let's talk about mass versus self. The book details the struggle between a constructed masculine person or persona, that authentic self. When did you first become aware of this internal conflict, and what was the hardest part of the mask to remove?
Well, so I think today, especially, it's very difficult because you're projecting these images through social media. So you have your accounts like on Facebook, and everybody just posts all the great things that are happening in their life. They don't really want to share about the difficulties and the struggles we have and the things that we're ashamed of. And so what happens is that pretty soon, you've papered over, the real face and heart, and you've got this phony image. And then when you really want to talk to someone, you're very lonely and isolated because you know that you presented a fraudulent image, to the outside world, and then you become more and more isolated, and that draws you ever inward and into depression. And so I didn't experience that myself. I didn't struggle with it that much. I'm actually a pretty transparent person. I'm easy about trusting others because that's how you build relationships quickly, and that was what made me very successful in sales. Is I would generally be more willing to share something vulnerable first, and then when you do that, that other person goes, "Wow, I don't know if I would have shared that, but he must trust me. I like that this person trusts me, and so maybe I'm willing to risk a little bit of trust with him." And that's how relationships are built.
Indeed. So let's talk about the queer identity and masculinity. As a queer man authoring a book on masculinity, how has your experience challenged, clarified, or expanded your definition of what masculinity can be?
As a what kind of man?
Is a queer and identity as your book? Did you discuss? Did you talk about queerness in the book itself, Mr. David?
I did not. I did
I
not.
did not. So
Mine is
let's.
Christian.
Mhm. Christian. So let's talk about the memoir itself. So it's a trace of redefinition of a core concept, right?
Right. Well, it's about your life. A memoir
Mhm.
basically is a story of your life.
Okay, how's your personal definition of a strength evolved from the beginning of your journey to where you are now?
Well, so if you go through the book, I tell little vignettes and stories, and I tried to make them humorous, but there were also some real vulnerable things. I'll just give you one little example. So when I was backpacking and I was a guide at Philmont, I also had to review all the campers that came through, and sometimes the parents would try to bring their son and get him in, but they had to be 13 years of age. And
Hmm.
one boy wasn't old enough to actually go and do the backpacking, and they were trying to sneak him in. And I said, well, he doesn't qualify. So
Hmm.
those boys are taken away from their group and they're put at this other scout camp that's just a static scout camp that's at the camp headquarters, and they're not with their group, and they hate it. And the parents should never have attempted to do that to begin with. And a lot of times those boys would try to run away, and so I was hiking back from the wilderness, heading to the base camp, and I see one of these runaway boys, and he's walking toward me, and his boots are untied. He doesn't have any food or water or anything. He's by himself. And I look at him and I said, "Hey, so where are you going?" And he said, "Well, I'm running away. I'm not going to stay at that place anymore." And I said, "Well, do you have any water?" And he said, "No, I don't have any water." I said, "Well, do you have anything to eat?" And he said, "No, I don't have anything to eat." And he was getting more frightened, as I was asking these questions to make him realize it. And and I said, "Well, what about the bears? What are you going to do about if you encounter a bear?" And he got more scared. And I said, "Well, look, here's a granola bar, and I'll give you this bottle of water, and I'm sure you'll be okay." And then I just walked, back toward camp, and let him go on his way. And he made about 20 yards, and then he turned around and he came running back after me. And he was, "Wait, take me back." And what was funny is that that was a real story and that young boy, but I saw myself in that boy, because lots of times that's what we're trying to do, is just run away from our problems. We're trying to
True.
escape from them. We don't want to deal with it, or there's situations or circumstances that we don't like. And I was actually I was 21 years old, and I was about to start my career as a civil engineer, and I was running away from relationships because I had fallen in love with this girl deeply in high school, and I had basically got dumped, and I took it
Hmm.
extremely hard. So I was running away from healthy female relationships, and I saw myself in that boy, and that's kind of like the little story from that chapter as an example.
Well, Mr. David, it's something to be proud of. The path metaphor suggests a solitary journey. Did you find that redefining masculinity for yourself required isolation, or did it unexpectedly lead you toward a deeper community and connection with others?
Definitely deeper community and connection. You cannot do it alone. In fact, that's really what I think our society today is struggling, because many young men are alone, and perhaps they didn't have a model, that showed them, hey, this is how to be a man, this is how to be a father, this is how you take care of a family. And daughters, if they didn't see a father model how to love a woman appropriately, then they get into promiscuous relationships. It's real important. The role of a father and a man is extremely important to our society. And you know you need other men to hold you accountable. You need people that you can trust, and then you need to say, look, I'm struggling with pride. You guys, you have podcasts. You've been quite successful, haven't you, Daniel? And so we have to be
Yep.
careful about thinking too much of ourselves. And so one of the things that I've done in terms of just my own podcast, I created a nonprofit because mine's Christian based, and that
Hmm.
way, I was at Podfest. There's a lot of people at Podfest that are promoting, monetization of your podcast. And I
True.
said, well, I'm not really interested in monetization because I'm a nonprofit. So I'm asking for grant funding or donors. And by putting myself in that position of dependence on others, that helps keep my pride in check. So the only affirmation I get that anything's going well with my podcast or my book is because other people believe in it, and other people are willing to spend money and invest in it to see that it grows. And so that's just one example of how you need guardrails and friends and other men, to help you with your blind spots.
Indeed. So, Mr. David, let's talk about the external noise. What are the loudest, most contradictory messages about masculinity that men receive today, and which one do you think the most damaging or paralyzing?
Well, I would say this whole gender issue, God made man and woman. There's male and female. It's a binary system. I
Yes.
don't think you can choose that I'm going to be something else today. Now, look, those people, they need help and they might have some trouble or they might need some counseling, but you physically, you're an innie or an outie. and and so I think you don't have to do anything but look down the front of your pants to know what you are. And
Hmm.
so all this confusion, and then it's attention seeking and now it's like, should these people be competing in sports? And so, if you're a young man today and you're saying, hey, I want to be a good godly man, like my father, or let's say he has a good role model, and then he gets attacked, by strong opposition. Uh, and those people are entitled to their opinions, but our society needs strong, capable young men. They're the ones who fight our wars and will be the future leaders of our country. And if they're living in their parents' basement, they're watching, video games and porn and smoking pot, that's not going to help us. I just watched that movie actually to prepare for this show, Failure to Launch, last night
Hmm.
with Matthew McConaughey, which was a great and humorous movie, but it kind of glorifies these three men, Bradley Cooper, Matthew McConaughey, and the other one, and they're all in their mid 30s still living at home, and that's not a good model. So what we need models in our entertainment industry, in movies, in books, to say, hey, that's a guy I want to be like. I mean, I don't know, Daniel, do you have someone that you look up to or that you emulate that you want to be like, as a model? Did you have someone like that?
Yes, indeed, a lot. Like the late Steve Jobs, or Elon Musk, or Steve Bezos, or these mogul entrepreneur.
You know what? That's a terrific example. So Elon Musk, he's incredible. I read his book Liftoff, since we're talking about books here too. And
Hmm.
so I was down last January, actually just a year ago, about this time, in South Texas, because I go fishing with some of my fraternity brothers. We have it's called a blasting cast. So we go duck hunting and fishing, and it was kind of slow. And then we realized, hey, Bahia Blanca, where they launch the SpaceX rockets from, is just right over here, an hour away. So we
Hmm.
drove over there, and I was able to watch a SpaceX launch in person. And I'd seen shuttle launches, and I've always been kind of a space fanatic because, I was 9 years old in 1969 when we landed on the moon, and it was a huge thing, for me. But to see that rocket launch and then to see the booster come back and
Uh-huh.
return all the way to the launch pad and hover there and then get grabbed by those chopsticks was probably the single most phenomenal engineering feat of man that I've ever witnessed in my whole life. And
True.
it was inspirational. So we need people
Yes.
like that who can dream those big dreams and put, his whole series of satellites out there with Skylink that are helping the people of Iran, communicate. So we need people like that.
True. We need people like I think Mr. Elon must do the baby steps for us. For sure, lots of more people will be like him, inspired by him,
Mhm.
because we want to go beyond our planet, right? Beyond our solar system to have another habitable zone because sooner or later we'll be explode. So we save our humanity for doing that. Don't you think, Mr. David?
Well, I certainly think that space is, a fabulous frontier. We need to go out. I hope that we don't destroy ourselves. I think that's a little bit of a dark view. Again, as a
Hmm.
Christian, I believe Elon Musk is a wonderful individual and everything, but he's not really a very good example of how a father should be to his children and how he drives the people at work, to exhaustion. And so you have to be careful that you're not just one dimensional, that you have balance in your life. And that's what, like I said earlier, I think, to me, a healthy man is a man who, has a will to obey, and that's God's will for me, a woman to love, and a work to do. And so his work to do, man, he's aces on that.
Hmm. Yes, I read the book of Elon Musk by Walter Isaacson. Mr. Elon Musk started with dysfunctional families, so Christian base is not wisely implemented. So if Mr. Elon Musk grew up with Christian teaching and plus those ideas, must probably most more, let's say the outcome is more better, right?
Yeah,
Because with the
hopefully. I
Christian
mean,
base.
I hope he has many children, and I just wonder, you know, what his children think of him. And in the end of the day, our children are really our true legacy. And I just
True.
want my children to be proud of me. I want them to know that I love them and that I put them first and that they were a very, very high priority in my life. And I think that's extremely important, and they need to see that. We all
Mm-hmm.
need to see models. We want to copy something. I just did a FaceTime with my granddaughter this morning. So I'm a grandfather, and it's just fantastic. And I have a grandson who just turned one last week, and I have a granddaughter who's 15 months. And so now we're FaceTiming, we're beginning to interact because they don't live nearby. But you know, they just need to experience unconditional love, but then also take them on little hikes, and look at every little bug and teach them about nature and teach them about insects and animals and, what you can observe from creation from our creator. And that's demonstrates how much he loves us. If you just, I'm just looking at the picture of my book there, Glacier National Park is one of the most spectacular places on the planet and its natural
Mm-hmm.
beauty. And so that's where you can, I think being out in nature is really essential to show your children that, to be still and know that I am God. And then, not get too wrapped up in news cycles and, those things that can distract us and pull us down.
Mr. David, let's talk about forgiveness. On the path like this, there's often a need for forgiveness of others, of past models, or of oneself. What was the process of forgiveness look like for you?
Well, it's difficult. I would have to say that for the majority of my life, I was a world-class grudge holder. And I'm not proud of that. But
Mm-hmm.
in the book, I talk about, I was married. I was married to a woman from Mexico City. She was,
Mm-hmm.
very exotic and different and from another country, and she was from an affluent family, and all that was very attractive to me. And then, we were married for 11 years, and then we had two children, and I was basically ambushed, with divorce papers. I wasn't expecting it at all, and I was extremely angry. And I had to forgive her. I had to quit trying to poison my children against their mother. I had to forgive myself, for whatever reasons that I had, that created that divorce. And I just didn't want my children to have to go through divorce because unfortunately, my parents divorced after 31 years when I graduated from college. I have two sisters and a brother who all divorced. And so, as the youngest member of my family, my hope is that I could be the one who could make it. And then, I didn't. So now, 100% of our family's marriages ended in divorce. And so forgiveness has been a big journey for me. And I think it's extremely important. You have to learn how to forgive others, forgive yourself, especially, in your most intimate relationships, with your wife, your children. I apologized. I remarried. I have some stepsons, and, we had some issues, with alcohol and drug abuse. And so we learned through going to those 12-step meetings, that the first thing you have to do is, you have to make these amends before you can restore the relationships. And so I've seen that worked in a very formal way through the alcoholism of family members and friends. And so forgiveness is extremely important. All I try to do now is shorten the cycle time for when I know I'm wrong to the time that I ask forgiveness. And it says in the Bible, don't let the sun set on your anger. And I had let that happen too many times, but now I think I've gotten a lot better in my cycle time and responding, and saying, "Look, I was wrong. I'm sorry. Please forgive me."
Definitely, yes. It's hard to ask forgiveness. But if you do it, it's priceless, people. It's priceless. And to forgive others too. Beyond critic and struggle, what are the sources of a genuine joy, peace, and freedom you've discovered in this new, more integrated understanding of yourself?
Well, I would say the secret it is a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, because we strive and we struggle, and what you have to do is you have to ask God. You said, there's a great Mark Twain quote, and it says, the two most important days of your life are the day that you were born, and the second is the day that you learn why. So it's like, Daniel, you
Yes.
have gifts, talents, skills. I've been given gifts, talents, and skills, and there's a purpose. I believe that there is a heavenly, extremely important purpose for each one of us as individuals. And so you can resist that, and you can fight that, and that's when you're living that life off of the path, and it's harder. And that striving, and our society really kind of promotes that. You just always got to be striving and working, and well, that's exhausting. But
Hmm.
if you are working in your giftedness, if you really have special, like for example, I can write poems easily. I just have a gift. So when you watch someone who's a tremendous athlete on the Olympics, or football or any sport, there's just some people that just make it look so easy. And so if you have this giftedness and you find that you're in alignment with it, well, then you're going to be at peace. I like to think of it as effortlessness versus striving. So if I'm and here's a good example. So if you have you ever been bird hunting with a bird dog?
Not yet, Mr.
Okay. So
David.
if you've ever been bird hunting with a bird dog, whether it's with quail or dove or duck hunting, these dogs are bred specifically for that purpose of retrieval. They want to go fetch that bird, bring it back, and please their master. That's all they want. And they're so
Hmm.
excited about doing it. And when you watch them, you're like, wow, man, that dog is amazing. And they're just waiting and waiting, and they're so anxious, and they're just so eager to please. And they obey their commands, and then they say, okay, now go hunt them up. And they'll just spring back and forth, and they will wear themselves out back and forth in the field in front of you, and flush and point on these birds, and then you shoot one, and then they'll bring it back to you, and then you pet them, you acknowledge them. But I want to feel like I'm that clearly in my purpose, and to the point that it's almost like an instinct that I don't
Hmm.
have to wonder. I know this is what I'm here for. This is what my gift is for. I'm like a bird dog, and I'm bringing birds back to please my master. And if I could feel that, man, that's joy. That's my definition of joy.
That awesome joy for sure. It's again priceless, people. And Mr. David, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in sixth season. Abstract poetry in third season, and my book 101 review and sixth season as well. Comedy 101 third season, and my food 101 in sixth season too. Geography 101 love letters, movie 101 review, music 101 our fifth season, science 101, sex 101 in its third season, trivia 101, law 101, mental health 101, Motivation 101, Entrepreneurship 101, and of course, my Bible Verses 101 are my baby podcasts. So listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. David, what aspect of writing these deeply personal memoirs surprised you the most? Perhaps a memory you had not considered, an emotion that refers surface, or a new clarity you gained?
I would say probably a new clarity that I gained, because when you go to write something, it's no small effort. Writing a book is not a small effort. And then when you're writing a memoir, it's even more significant because it's about you, it's about your life, and you're looking back at the events that shaped you, and it's if you think of us as like being sculpted, there's this rock, and then you just get chiseled away, and you remember all the little blows, that kind of made you. And so I had a much deeper awareness of the importance of the people that were invested in me. The scoutmasters, the teachers, my parents, my friends who helped me through the divorce. I when I did my podcast, I actually went chapter by chapter in my book and had a guest on my show who was in my life at the time, of that
Mm-hmm.
chapter, which was really I'm so pleased that I did that, because even after I'm deceased, my children will have that and will know more about, what I did, why I did it, and it's kind of an audio record of it. And so I would just say I've had greater clarity in every aspect, but especially in love, and that, so I remarried in 2002 to Kim, and we've been married for 24 years this year, and she's just been the love of my life. And getting it right the second time after really properly evaluating what I mean, really, when I got divorced, I had no intention of ever getting married again. And I had to really do a pretty deep self introspection on that. And I realized that I didn't have a very good criteria the first time. And so I reevaluated my criteria. I decided that I really was intentionally looking for a woman to marry. And guess what? For all you listeners out there, I mentioned this one podcast that, when you take the SAT and you're trying to get into the best schools in the country, you want to be in that top
Yes.
quartile. Well, if you want to be in the top quartile for all the most wonderful women in the United States, just go ahead and say, I'm looking for someone to marry, because all the other men aren't saying that. They're not willing to be intentional about it. And so, boom, you're going to put yourself in the top quartile right away just by saying,
Yes.
being intentional about it. And I really believe that. And so that's going to open up the possibilities, because women have greater risk in marriage, especially if they're planning to have a family, because they're like, my body's going to change. I'm going to bear a child. I need a reliable man, and so they're looking for things like that in men. And that was something that was really quite a revelation to me. And Lord has been very good to me, blessing me with my wife Kim now.
Yes, people, claim it. Claim it, that mindset that I want to be a number one podcaster. It will elevate you. And Mr. David Savage, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So can you please invite the listeners to support your book, your advocacy, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Yes, I would just like to send them to my website, www.thesavagepath.com. You can learn more about me. You can see I have about 127 episodes up. So I've been around for 4 years, lots of content out there. And my podcast is called Wrestling with the Inner Man, if you want to check that out.
Mhm.
Wrestling with the Inner Man.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. David Savage, because if you support him for sure, more and more empowering episodes of the podcast itself, more and more empowering books like this to rise. So, Mr. David, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate it very much. And hey, I'd be interested in being on your music one too. I got a real passion for music.
Definitely, and my Bible verses 101.
Yeah.
Don't you think? Yes, I will send you an invitation for that. And again, people, see you next for my next episode. Mr. David, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
Welcome, people. See you